What up, everybody? How's it going? It's your boy Ken and I here, and I want to talk to you guys today about manga and comic books, mostly just manga. Let's be real. Um, and I want to compare the differences between mangas and comic books on just the very complete surface level, and then dive into what I would love to see manga do in the future, quite potentially. That I believe would be really dope. But again, it's all it's just kind of how things have been, and it's kind of for me, from what I've learned or at least noticed, manga is generally done more as like an anthology series. Like it's like a bunch of stories in one collection. That's why you got like Shonen Jump magazines, you got some shoujo magazines and all that stuff. Where it's a bunch of different stories that are collected, series that are collected in one magazine that's either weekly or monthly, and it's released. That's complete opposite of comic books. Comic books are generally done um, by series. It's basically you have an X Men series by one author is going to go for a certain run, and that's it. And oftentimes, a lot of those series aren't weekly. A lot of them at most might be monthly if you're lucky. And that's what I kind of want to dive in the differences with comic books and manga right now. I think manga would be great to have as a sort. I'm curious if people would be down for a lot of their manga series being monthly or being at least every other week. I don't know if people call it fortnightly. I love that word. So where manga series are fortnightly as opposed to weekly. There's a lot of talk, you'll see everywhere on the interwebs where people are talking about how manga artists, anime artists, animators in Japan it aren't doesn't have the best of environments. And that's a whole nother story for another day. I'm thinking overall, like, would it change? Would that change the whole environment thing in terms of like if they didn't have to, churn out chapter after chapter, week after week? Would just giving them every other week to turn out just slightly more pages compared to if they were supposed to do it every week? And will they give them more time to think about the story, less stress, and be able to get the details of the chapters out? I am a fan of monthly manga. I My first monthly manga was I think Full Metal Alchemist, not Brotherhood, just Full Metal Alchemist. And when Brotherhood was coming out and announced, I started reading it. I started reading the series pretty much from the beginning, and I realized at some point I caught up. I was like, oh, and then it was monthly, and I found out that it was monthly. I was like, what is this nonsense? And then years later, I ended up reading Attack on Titan again, another monthly series, and it got me thinking about manga and like I don't know if it's me. I feel like a lot of the better series are monthly. I could be 100% wrong for anybody that does it, but like I feel that giving the mangaka time to actually develop the story, time to figure out what they're going to do, a chapter that in the past, you know, a volume or a arc where you will look at it, you might have two to three chapters or more. Like that's just like a lot of mostly just still drawn images. That's just like part of the battle, and just to allow it for it to be like, all right, I don't really know what I'm gonna do here, but I'm gonna draw this awesome scene, and that's where you get a lot of those big, full page images. And I think I don't know if that's the case, but it's probably to show off your art and show off all the cool stuff. But in my mind, it's also a case of like, well, we might have to buy time. Let's make this more of a drawing, exhibition, and really show what we're going to do while we come up with an idea to like come up with the plot, because it's insane. Can we talk about how insane mangakas are, like what they are expected to do? And to be able to turn out a lot of the stuff that they do weekly, I have nothing but mad respect. Um, I honestly hope that they're doing this in the, in terms of like they kind of already have like a lot of this stuff banked, and they're just kind of like animate, they're just like drawing it, and then like kind of putting the dialogue together. But if a lot of them reach a point where they have to catch up weekly, I can't imagine that. I can't imagine the stress that is to have to put out something that's weekly. You know, I think at that point you might as well just go for like the light novel model and put a nice little 100-page story out there, for people to be able to read a little bit more. It takes more time. You can develop it a little bit better. But I think that's what separates manga and comic books. Because comic books generally is, I think at best is every 2 weeks. But even then, you won't get a series started. Um, I don't think most comic book series start until the artist is at least somewhat into the process, because in the states, in the West, like comic books are they're colored, while manga is black and white. So I guess some people will say, yeah, you can do that a little bit faster because it's black and white. You're not adding all that extra stuff, but in a lot of sense, adding the lack of color adds a whole other element to it that I love as well, and the way you shade and the way and whatnot. So, and manga is a whole nother beast in itself. And not only that, it has to be done weekly. Most comic books are probably being done on average every other week, if at best. Even then, it's like probably once a month, once every other month, because of the amount of time it takes to be able to produce an actual series from beginning to end, to get it colored properly, to get it to get it read through by the editor and all that stuff. It's insane. And with manga, even if the chapter comes out on a weekly basis, that's not usually the finished product until the volume drops. And that's why that's where it hits me. Like, would manga be would this is more from a Westerner standpoint. Would you be fine? Because we have Shonen Jump, we have now a bunch of avenues to be able to read manga, legitimately, legally, on a weekly basis. But what if you had to wait a while? Like, what if, just like comic books, you are now reading a manga that didn't release until the volume actually dropped? Like, you will get a bunch of volumes, and the volumes might be, you will get a volume once every 3 months, let's say. So like you have to wait, but you're getting 3 months of chapters, right? Would that be something that you'll be down for? I don't know. I think at the end of the day, I would love for it to be monthly. I think monthly seems like the best. Like, you can get a lot in there. Yes, it sucks to not have it week by week, but for quality of story, I think you can do it on a monthly basis. Like, I think those who can do it on a weekly basis is already like few and far between. Imagine giving those same mangakas like a month to be able to come up with the story, not being forced to put everything out, and to really dive into the world building. Because at the end of the day, they can still decide to put 60 to 80 chapters out. You know what I mean? Like, they could go for 15 pages per week, essentially, or 20 pages or more per week, depending on how it is. And even then, that still wouldn't be a full volume. Volumes are, there's so many chapters typically in a volume. And that's one of the things I would love for mangas to happen. Is like, I wouldn't mind if the quality is up there, and the creative minds behind the story isn't forced to go into like just full on like stress mode, where they can not force themselves. I wouldn't mind if it if the if manga and manhwa is another example. Like, just recently, I started getting into manhwa, and I think the few series that I've read, you'll you get the high. It feels like in manhwa it happens a little bit more frequently, or at least the author or artist isn't afraid to be like, you know what, I have to take a step back. Because all you read is like, oh yeah, I've spent years working on this, not giving myself any kind of break, forcing myself, to crank this out, and push themselves hard because of a series becoming popular. And like, why? Why are you forcing yourself to do that? Like, why are you doing that to yourself? Instead of just being like, you know what, I'll publish this once a month. I'll give you close to the same amount of material, and even if it's less, you at least give more time to figure out what you do. You can give yourself time to relax. You're not overworking yourself to the bone to put something out that people are going to read in 15 minutes. You know, there's several people who reread mangas and reread chapters and everything, but a lot of the time they're putting all this blood, sweat, and tears into a product that they're only going to have people read for 15 minutes. You know, like, so, and that's being generous, because you got people who love to just like take in the art, you know. But if it was me, I would not mind the mangaka to just be like, you know what, if the model went to every other week at the very minimum, at the very maximum, but monthly for most series, and then all you have to do with something like that is like, what if Shonen Jump, you know, featured a few different series every week. So like, for example, you have like Doctor Stone 1 week of the first. Let's go back like 4 weeks, setup. Let's say Doctor Stone is week one, and then you have My Hero is the second week of the month, and you got Black Clover is the third week of the month, and you got One Piece the fourth week of the month, and then you pick a couple of other series behind that, and then you end up with more like less series, but more like at least story in depth, um, the storytelling and imagery and all that stuff. So, what do you guys think about that? Now, the second part that I want to go and dive deep into is the idea, and it goes back to the concept of the anthology type setup of, you know, Japanese manga typically being in a magazine that has a bunch of different stories collected, as opposed to the Western, I'll say, style of it's series by series. You don't have a DC book that has all your DC comics at once. And that's a good question. Would you, for those who live in the West, would you want your comic books to be set up that way? Would you love having comic books put out? You know, again, it doesn't have to be like all at once, but would you love to be able to have a comic book happen every, a whole book that's just all new comics all together? Would that be something that you'd be down for? Mind you, the reason why a lot of comics are set up the way they are is because, yeah, you might get that, but it'll probably either be higher priced. So like, it'll be like, yeah, you'll be getting something like on a weekly basis that has a bunch of stories from that company, and it's like all DC, comics, and each time you have a main story and all that stuff. Would you be done with that? I think the biggest problem, and I think that's for me part of my fear with um mangas and manhwas and all that, is like, when they bunch the series the way they do, I feel like other series don't get the chance to really shine, or at least get the chance to prove how well they're doing. And you have to wait until the volumes to really know, is this something that's worth is this something that's worth continuing? It's just how it is. And I always find it interesting because they do a lot of polls, popularity polls, and out there, and it's like, man, the amount they do is insane. So for me with manga, I would love to see more series be not more franchises be not just like one main story and that's about it, but so many different overarching stories. Because so this is where my first start came from. Bleach and Naruto. Back in the early 2000s, when I started watching Bleach and Naruto on Toonami, um, I started to notice, like, man, this is a story. This is something that I would love to continue to learn about, and this would be cool if this was a side story, where it doesn't have to be, the whole thing. It doesn't have to be like, oh, we're going to put a another 200 to 300 chapter out to make you love it, and be like, all right, and then you just have multiple, but like, have like a 16 chapter, mini series. Like, have something that's like, and it's monthly. You know what I mean? I think that's why I need to read Vigilantes, and I actually know I need to read Vigilantes, My Hero Academia Vigilantes, and I think that's That's what I'm talking about. Horikoshi, like, creating a side story, within the world of My Hero Academia, within the world of courts, and the idea that vigilantes will exist, and having that whole story that I haven't read yet. I think that's one of the great things about it, because I don't think it's something that he intends to have go for like a stupid long amount of time. But he has a story that he came up with, and then he'll continue. It's the same thing where, like, I okay, on the inside, I'm kind of mad that this didn't happen, but I love when My Villain Academia happened. It was a short arc that separated, that went to the focus of the villains, and I love that so much, because you had basically, it was an arc in itself. And I think that probably is what happens a lot of the times, is instead of doing a separate story, people, mangakas probably be like, you know what, let's make this a 6 to 7 chapter arc and call it a day. But sometimes I want to still read the story from the perspective of the main character, because I would love to see My Villain Academia, but at the same time, that happened around when, if I'm not mistaken, that happened around when the internships were happening. So probably close to it. So it'd be awesome to have seen Deku and, Deku, Bakugo, and Todoroki, like, working with Endeavor and seeing that whole thing happen. But at the same thing, Horikoshi decides to have a separate mini series that was My Villain Academia, that we, like, people were, all right guys, go ahead, check out My Villain Academia. It's going to be 12 chapters, or a whole arc, 20 chapters, whatever it is, of just pure My Hero from the point of the villains. And maybe if it works well enough, you can have someone spin off and tell the story. And that's stuff I would like. Bleach, in my opinion, would have been amazing, because you think about it. You got Bleach, in my opinion, you have such an amazing story. For example, you have the Quincy. Before we got the Thousand Year Blood War arc, I think the having a separate story from Uryu's perspective with regards to the Quincy, and having, learning stuff about his dad, learning stuff about his heritage, that didn't need to be fleshed, that didn't have to be 100% connected to the Thousand Year Blood War arc with Juha Box. Like, it would have been cool to learn some of that stuff. We got the Bound arc, which I'm not mistaken was filler in the anime, but something where, like, they were related to the Quincy's. I would have loved something like that. I would have loved to see, once you introduce the Vizards, maybe, and you got that where there was an arc specifically about them. But I would have loved for that to be separate. You know what I mean? I would have loved to have stories about the each of the division, like a separate miniseries for each of the divisions, that was not a part of the main story, but allowed to give us more, of a background on the characters, to allow us to understand how much, how the characters are different, and get to know their motivations. Naruto, there are five there are five main hidden villages. Five main hidden villages. There's a bunch of other smaller ones, but there's five main hidden villages. With the five Kages. And with just, like, once that was a thing and that was shown, automatically you could have, I already thought about it, you could have had a series for each of those. You know what I mean? And their surrounding countries. It would have been amazing. Instead of making Naruto this whole massive thing in the story, imagine having five different stories being told from each perspective, and, like, it could have started off with the hidden mist, you know, the hidden mist. What's the word I'm looking for? Mission, which is obviously all that, and then that could have, like, branched off as, like, yeah, there's a lot more to the ninja world than you guys know. And then you could have had different teams, like, end up in different countries, and then maybe they stay in that country and learn about that country while, you know, there's multiple Gennings in the Hidden Leaf that we are all accustomed to. Imagine having a series where each of those Genning teams ends up in a different, hidden village to learn. And that was the time, not even learn, but like to do a mission, and then at that point transition, and we get to know more from the perspectives of the villagers themselves, the hidden villagers themselves. So that's what I'm thinking in my mind's eye. The other example is Haikyuu. Sports animes would do amazing with the format of universe building. I believe sports animes, because you have different schools, you have different rivalries, different characters. I Sports animes would be amazing to just have a series based off of Haikyuu. Let's use Haikyuu as an example. You have Karasuno, the main school, but then you could have a dope series, looking at Aobo Joysai from Okawa's perspective, seeing Nekoma from our boy Kenma's perspective, seeing all these other schools that we will eventually learn about and see a spinoff for a little while from the perspective of a um character that they faced, and give us more backstory. Like the Mia twins. Like, Mia Atsumo and Osamu. Like, it would have been great to see hit their school and see them play, to see them, and even if it's more so a slice of life, seeing them, practice and their personalities and how well they do it. I would love that. And it's something that you can't do in manga as much as you can in anime. If a studio decides to extend it a little bit and have a little fun, especially if the art mangaka allows for that. I think for mangas, like, it would be great to have, like, all right, I'm gonna give you these characters. This is their basic personality. Let's see what you can do with it, and like create opportunities for anybody who would love to do it. While you still have your main, while the mangaka can still have their main cash cow, you can spin off and be like, all right, because in Western comics, you can have one character be done by 30 to 40 different artists and authors, and just telling their own version of that character. That's not quite what I want in Japan. I just want them to have all these different stories and create these new universes, and in a sense, maybe in a sense, telling the story from a different school's perspective, and we can see that, like Datako, Datatech, and all that stuff. So this is what I would love to see more of in manga, is like a greater universe. And I haven't read One Piece. Trying to find the motivation and the courage to start reading that behemoth of a series, but I can tell that the world building there is pretty damn good. From the way everybody talk about it and the way it seemed like it's structured, it seemed like a lot of time is spent in a different location of One Piece, of the One Piece universe, and it seems like there's a lot of time spent in each of those locations, and it's not a sense. I have a feeling like I think it's Oda is the mangaka for One Piece. I have a feeling like he or she probably like has like all right, this is like each arc is the thought process, like, all right, this is this comic run, you know what I mean, like this is the 20 to 30 comic book run of this, and that's how he does it. And I find that fascinating, because that's probably how I believe it should be done. So at some point I will read One Piece. When I'm going to read One Piece, I don't know. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Eventually I'm going to read 1,000+ chapters. It's at 1,004 or 5 at this point. Yeah. But not overall, I would love that to be the way mangas happen in the future. If a series is popular enough, My Hero, you have the Vigilantes, you have other countries with heroes, so it doesn't have to stick to just Japan. It's clearly quirks is everywhere, and they all don't have to be this huge thing. They can each be its own little individual, small, self-contained story, depending on what the characters are going to be about. And again, it sounds like you get that in Vigilantes, which again, I need to read that too. So I would love to get more of that in the series as a whole. Now, to recap, ultimately, I believe manga should be bi-weekly or monthly. I don't think it should be a weekly thing. I think they should swap when some of the larger titles are distributed, and then add a couple of smaller titles with it, and hopefully try to keep it going. I think having each manga just being told from just having them be like giving the mangakas more time to tell a more cohesive story, just a richer story to be able to like kind of create connect the dots and whatnot, and just allowing them not to stress over time. And then the second part was I honestly wish there was more different spin-off series of mangas. I wish that more manga series, but logically so within the current series. I think I'm gonna throw this out there real quick. Boruto is an example of like I don't consider that a spinoff, more as so a continuation. For me, for me, Naruto spinoffs is the each of the hidden villages, the five Kage villages, main five Kage villages, and finding out stories from each one, because each village has its own culture, each village has their own look. Like for the greatest example, the hidden um the hidden cloud is it hidden cloud? I can't speak. The hidden cloud village. You can tell that's a whole completely different culture. So I'm curious how that would be done, like interpreted if that was the main focus. Like it's all about the personalities. It's all about how they present themselves. And seeing like the hidden myths with the whole background with the hidden myth village with the the seven swordsmen. That's another thing. Like you could have elaborated with that. We got some of that in Boruto, and I like that. I just believe that it would have been better if we got that. Like if after they dealt with Zabuza and Zabuza and Haku died, like what if we had the opportunity to go to the hidden mist, and then it was like a spin-off series of that, and maybe different missions could give us different, like whether it's mini series or actual spin-off series that last 50 to 100 chapters. I think that would be cool in the franchises if you got more of that, and not have it to be same thing, a monthly thing, and where the mangaka could just alternate. So, what do you guys think? What do you guys think about manga as a whole? About what? How would you do it differently? Do you prefer the weekly release, or would you be down for a monthly, or at the very minimum bi-weekly, every other week, fortnightly? There we go. I'm gonna start using fortnightly more often. Would you like a fortnightly release or a monthly release of series rather than a weekly release if it meant that the author, the mangakas, the artists are not overworked, or and also have the opportunity to potentially tell a much better story, in that same time because they're not, being stressed. And the second part, do you believe that there should be more spin-off series? Do you believe that instead of having the anthology type releases that, companies like Shonen Jump should have, you know, several mangas released at different times of the week, or different, or not just week, but just like you have one day, but then have different kinds of series. So like you have your once a month of a Naruto stories, and it could be it could be Naruto, it could be the Naruto the hidden mist, Naruto the hidden leaf, or it could be like Naruto or it could be Gara the hidden sand, stuff like that, right? Where you have like a titular character and you learn about that area, or it's like Bleach, Division 13, where it could be still like it's more of a like it's released in its own little book for that series, but you maybe have like still a magazine style, but different types of series within it. I think that would be kind of a cool way to go about it. But once again, thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed yourself. I know I ramble. If you guys made it this far, I appreciate you guys. You guys are the real ones. At the end of the day, enjoy yourself. Have a good time. Enjoy life as it is given to you. But on the real, just have fun, be you, do what you do best, enjoy life, and As always, peace and be easy.